Hello everybody and welcome back to the Film Freaks podcast, the latest form of cinephile entertainment, hosted by Tyler Christian from CaliCriticReviews. That's me, of course, as me and another movie buff discuss the latest week in movies, whether it's the news, trailers, and the latest releases to hit the theaters in the past week. And joining me today is one of my very good friends on YouTube. I met him just over a year and a half ago almost. He was one of my first friends that I met when I started making videos, and he makes very great videos as well, and that is Mr. Tom Veliotis.
Hey, how's it going?
And before we jump into everything, I just want to give you guys a bit of an update for why we didn't have an episode last week for Prometheus, in which Jordan from the Ronet Review was supposed to come on board along with Alan Gunn 97. And the reason why that didn't happen is because I had college finals, I had a lot of papers and assignments to complete before, and I also was moving out in the last week as well, so I just didn't have time to do an episode, but we will, of course, repay you guys with that. We have several episodes coming up soon, which will have multiple guests for the biggest movies like The Amazing Spider-Man and Dark Knight Rises. Updates on these will be posted in the future if you like us on Facebook and so much more. But now it's time to talk about the stuff that has happened in the last week. Of course, we start with the Hollywood 3, which is where we break down the latest news stories and the biggest headlines that come out of Hollywood for movies either in production or just announcements in general. Then we move on to Trailer Talk, which we review the latest trailers to have released in the past week. And then we finish it off with Rate the Release, where we reviewed the latest movies to release in the past weekend. And for this time, it will be Rock of Ages, which will come up later. But first, let's jump into Hollywood 3. And this first one, you have to admit, we have been in a very interesting week in movie announcements because Paramount Pictures is really putting themselves in limbo right now because of how many movies they have in production that are huge budgets and how a lot of them are just being reported behind schedule, over budget, and just they need reshoots all the time. And the first one of those was World War Z. Now, this is the one that stars Brad Pitt. It's based on the acclaimed novel by Max Brooks. And a lot of people have been anticipating this film adaptation, and it's directed by Mark Forster, who I will admit he's not really the greatest director from his credits that I've seen. I think the only film that I enjoyed of his, which, you know what, I can't even think of one, but then again, I haven't seen Monsters Ball yet, so let's just jump into it. It's been scheduled for 5 to 7 weeks of reshoots because the studio was very dissatisfied with some of the footage, and Damon Lindelof, who wrote Prometheus, has been brought in for rewrites. What do you think of this?
Well, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, a lot of people are very skeptical now on this whole project, seeing, how there's rewrites and how, there's, reshoots and whatnot. Personally, I'm kind of scared myself. I mean, whenever you hear that a movie like this, especially, a movie like this where a lot of people want to see it, just the fact that, there are reshoots and, that Lindelof is coming in for rewrites, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm on board with that because
I have to agree right there because even though he wrote so many episodes of Lost and he had been nominated for Emmy several times for his writing in that show, you have to admit that his transition to movies has not really been that strong. Like, it started with Cowboys and Aliens last year, which that was a huge bomb, and also one of the biggest criticisms was the writing. And then when you have Prometheus, which he heavily rewrote and had most of the final credit to, you have to admit that that was one of the biggest flaws in that movie, too.
That is very true. I mean, again, the fact that he's been nominated for Emmys and went on for Lost, and I feel that he is definitely better when it comes to writing for television shows, but, like you said, Cowboys and Aliens, definitely a flop, and the writing was definitely a letdown, and as well as Prometheus, because, I mean, a lot of people, as much as they loved it, I was one of the people who was definitely a little overwhelmed by it. I was a little bit disappointed, or a lot, I should say, and I think that, the writing kind of showed there. So, I mean, this whole thing about, the reshoots and for rewrites, it's a little nerve-wracking, but we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it's really interesting for who to really blame in this situation, though, because they did call in several writers, even in pre- and current production, to help rewrite the script. And also, Brad Pitt was the one that chose Mark Forster to direct, and even a lot of people are blaming Forster more than anyone else for these problems because a lot of people are saying that he's very unreliable on set, and he just didn't really show any enthusiasm with the project as much as others would have hoped for.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because there's plenty of movies like this that a bunch of writers are brought in to, of course, write it, and I don't know, like, when I see things like this, it really just it just doesn't feel right. Because it feels like this whole movie's just gonna fall apart. Which, I mean, I guess you could say it already is, but it's.
What can you do, really?
That is true. What can you do?
Yeah. Now moving on to another project that's also from Paramount Pictures, who is distributing World War Z once it will finally release. The next one is The Lone Ranger. Now this is an adaptation of the famous, I think it's a TV series, if I'm correct, right?
I believe so. Yes, it was. Yep.
Yeah, and it stars Armie Hammer and Johnny Depp in the lead roles, and this was already a very highly publicized production taking place months ago when it was released, and Gore Verbinski's directing, who's hot off of his Academy Award win for the animated film Rango. Now, for this film, though, it has already faced scrutiny because of how much a lot of the diehard fans are saying it already deviates from the source material, which it's adapting. But now there are recent reports that have also come in now on that it is reported over budget, which was already a concern at first because the original budget before it even started shooting was $250 million. And before they could even start shooting, they had to lower it. And when they got to the point of 215, they finally got the green light to shoot. But now it is reported back over budget, and it's also behind schedule, and a lot of that is emphasized, in which they said that they're going to have to cut out more scenes than they already have that they shot, too.
Yeah, I mean, again, much like the story we just went over with World War Z, this is definitely kind of, it shows that this movie is kind of just falling apart. I mean, alone, it's weird how much money they already spent, because, I mean, looking back at it, I haven't really seen the original show,
Neither
but
have
it's a Western, essentially, so it's weird how they spent this much money. It kind of just, I don't know, it's weird to me, but anyway, again, just the fact that they're behind schedule and over budget, I mean, those two alone are just huge factors in making a movie, so, I mean, this is, interesting and where this is actually going to end up, but like you said, they're going to have to take out a lot of scenes and whatnot, so
this is a strong reason on why Paramount's not having a huge presence at Comic-Con this year, because these are two releases that will do a great job at targeting at Comic-Con, but because of the fact that they're both World War Z and The Lone Ranger in so much trouble right now, that definitely shows why they backed out.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if it's just the fact that one of them they need to do reshoots, and the fact that one of them is behind schedule. I mean, I kind of feel bad for Paramount.
Yeah, true. But they wish that they could have helped retain their licenses for all the Marvel movies that they've helped distribute.
That is true. They do have the Avengers under their belt, so.
Well, actually, no. I think Disney owns Marvel now, and the fact that Paramount, they just have their distribution company in the name of it is what I heard, actually. Like, they never really had a hand in, like, fully distributing the picture, actually.
Oh, okay.
So, technically, that does show how much they're in trouble now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But now moving on to some later bit of news, in which we already hinted at that a few seconds ago, actually, in which the first panel schedules for this year's San Diego Comic-Con were announced. And we're just going to kind of run down these and say which ones are the ones that we're looking forward to, others that we may not care about, or are just neutral until we actually see something from them. But I'm just going to run down on a few of the biggest panels for TV first that are coming to Comic-Con. Certain ones returning, of course, will be The Big Bang Theory on CBS, in which it's going to have its first appearance in Hall H. There's the Adult Swim series Children's Hospital, which is one of my favorite shows on TV, one of the most absurd comedies ever created, but I just love the hell out of it so much. And there's also other Adult Swim shows like The Venture Brothers, Robot Chicken, Black Dynamite, and so much more. But then there's also big network ones that are coming to show first footage of, like the new series Revolution, which is from J.J. Abrams and the creator of Supernatural. There's also Glee, The Vampire Diaries. I mean, this list could just go on forever. But which ones interest you? Oh yeah, wait, let me take that back right there. I forgot this, and this is a very important one. Just yesterday, before we recorded this actually, we found out that Breaking Bad is going to have its first appearance at Comic-Con, and they're going to screen the Season 5 premiere. So I think that's something that we got to discuss more than anything else, really.
Oh, definitely. I mean, for those who don't know, and I'm pretty sure most of you know, me and Tyler are both huge fans of Breaking Bad.
In fact, we kind of whore it out sometimes, too.
Yeah, I guess that's more of an understatement, but yeah, we're definitely huge fans of the show, and finding this out really made me just... I'm just so jealous of anybody who's going, because, I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, speaking right here, guilty as charged. But as for other ones for TV shows, it's basically the usual, in which Fox always has one of the biggest presences, in which they bring nearly every show that they have, whether it's animated or live action. The CW also has a lot of their stuff arrive, but one of the bigger ones is that FX usually doesn't have the biggest presence. Like, all that they really have is the Sons of Anarchy, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, do you pay attention to Sons of Anarchy at all, or not?
Unfortunately, no. That's definitely a show that's on my radar at the moment. I do want to check it out eventually, though.
Yeah, as usual, that show will be returning as it has for the past 2 or 3 years, I think. But this year, that panel's a lot different because originally it's just the creator and the 3 lead stars that are showing up. This time they have the entire build cast, which accounts to like 10 panel members at the most, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a show to get into right there if you're listening to this, because like it may not be a strong Emmy contender in terms of like drama series specifically, but it's got phenomenal acting in it, I'll give it that. But now moving on to the movie panels, which is what a lot of people come to Comic-Con for, specifically in the entertainment aspect, in which not a lot of very big ones were really announced, but I can take that back for a few of them, in which the biggest one that has been announced is Marvel's Iron Man 3, which just started shooting a few weeks ago. Disney's going to be returning after its absence last year with Wreck-It Ralph and Oz the Great and Powerful. Warner Brothers will, of course, be there for The Hobbit Part 1 and Man of Steel, but they will not be doing anything Dark Knight Rises related because they're keeping that in secrecy, and they've never added it either. There's Guillermo del Toro's Pacific Rim, and Sony has several lined up, but they have yet to confirm. The Expendables 2 will be there, and then all those crazy fangirls out there will be camping out several days early because the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2 is going to be there, which, really, do we care? No.
Of course not.
So, out of all those that I have read off, though, and in fact, if Paramount decides to show, like, the best that we could see is G.I. Joe Retaliation from the stuff that they have not shown the trailers, but of course with the ironic instance of the fact that they've pushed for reshoots and 3D post-conversion, just like almost the rest of the other films. The last thing that we could expect anything is Star Trek 2, but even that hasn't been confirmed at all either. So what do you think of the presence of the movie panels that are coming this year?
I mean, I think you do got some good ones. I'm actually looking forward to Wreck-It Ralph quite a bit. I think it's interesting. It looks like an interesting movie. We'll be talking about that later, but that alone I think is pretty cool. Iron Man 3, that's really interesting. The Hobbit, of course, and like you mentioned, you do got some big movies that they're going to be, that are going to be there. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's pretty decent for the most part, and I do like how Warner Brothers isn't bringing the Dark Knight Rises because, like you said, they got to keep it under secrecy, which I think is perfect because I don't want to know anything about that before seeing it.
Yeah, I really don't think anyone wants to do anything like that. But also for the fact that even if they were to screen that movie, imagine how much time people would take out of their day to not even be in the convention center. You'd literally have to be in line the morning of it's happening if it was shown in the evening, which means that you're pretty much just throwing your day away for one movie, even if there's a chance that you might not get into it too.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, everyone would be going after that. I'm pretty sure everyone would just be in line for that one movie, so.
Yeah, agreed. Now, as for me, since I am attending this year, none of you know that already now, as for movie panels, there are some that I'm interested in. Like, I think there are some specifically like Man of Steel and The Hobbit and An Unexpected Journey, which I'd really like to see the first footage of because those are two very anticipated films, especially for me with Man of Steel because I was really disappointed with Zack Snyder's last film, Sucker Punch, but it seems like he works best with adapted material, stuff that he's not working with that's his own stuff. Moving on to also The Hobbit, especially with the craze that it started with the testing of the 48 frames per second footage that it caused at, was that CinemaCon, I think?
Yeah, I know a lot of people were definitely, mad about that, I believe. Were very dissatisfied with the footage.
Yeah, the main reason they were so dissatisfied, too, is because they said that it looked too real, where you could literally see through parts that looked like sets, of course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so those are just a list of most of the biggest panels that will be at Comic-Con this year, and of course I'll try to attend most of these if I can, which, speaking of which, I may do a Comic-Con themed episode of the Film Freaks podcast once I'm back with people that did attend, so just throw that out there. Once again, we'll update if ends up happening. So we're now going to move on to trailer talk, which really this has been kind of a dead week for trailers. There haven't really been a lot that have released. But in the past 2 weeks, there were some very key ones, and the first one is Django Unchained, both the teaser and international trailer for Quentin Tarantino's latest film, aka my idol for filmmaking. What did you think of this, Tom?
Oh, I mean, when I was there, basically, I was waiting for this trailer for a long time. I'm pretty sure most people were. But as far as the teaser goes, it's a really satisfying teaser. I mean, it definitely looks like a Tarantino production. I'm loving the cast, of course. He always has a good cast. And, from what I've been hearing, this is definitely going to be, it could be his most controversial film. It looks like it's going to be gory. It looks like it's going to have some great acting, especially by Leonardo DiCaprio, who looks like he's really relishing in this role. He's going to just be, just kind of a scene stealer. And the international trailer is I guess you could say essentially the teaser, just with a couple more clips. But what they do show is some really satisfying footage, and I'm definitely excited for this movie.
As am I. I cannot look forward to this film more than almost anything because Quentin Tarantino, got me into the film buff that I am today. But what I really dig the most about this trailer is the kind of style that he has within his directing. Of course, the dialogue, you can tell, is very Tarantino from the way it's structured and the way his characters deliver it. But I'm really digging of how his style in terms of directing, though, in which he's basically crossing together his styles that he used for a lot of his 90s movies with the Inglourious Basterds touch, in which it's going to be very comedic at times, but also transcend into those dark territories that you usually don't expect. And I think that's what's really going to propel this movie above some of his past films that he has done before.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's what I love most about his movies is that, you find comedy in the most absurd, moments and just ultra-violent, all these violent moments, but you still manage to laugh. And that's, I think, what's really great about his movies. But, yeah, this one alone just looks great. And it's definitely, I'd say, my top 3 most anticipated of this whole year.
Yeah, also in a most recent episode of Film Freaks I did with Eric Bazert from Bazert Productions, we ended up discussing of how Tarantino will potentially have a presence at Comic-Con because of the emerging artist contest that he unleashed for people to edit together their own versions of the Django footage and make it into a trailer of their own. So we forgot to bring that up, surprisingly, in our Comic-Con segment, which there's a strong chance that Tarantino will be there for the first time, too.
Yeah, I heard about that. That is really awesome.
Yeah, I love how he's giving back to the fans right there, too, because he's kind of been a secret guy when it comes to his fan base most of the time.
That's very true.
Yeah, now moving on to our next trailer, which is for a new Robert Zemeckis film. Now, it's not in the motion capture animation technique that he has been working with ever since The Polar Express, if I'm correct. He's finally returning back to live action, and this stars Denzel Washington. He plays a pilot who ends up saving a bunch of people from a plane crash in which he lands the plane in a very extraordinary way, which baffles a lot of people who are eyewitnesses to it. But then an investigation happens in which there's a lot more behind it, in which he could face severe jail time for an action that he ended up conducting before he even started flying the plane. Now, I am not the biggest fan of Robert Zemeckis' films. I think Forrest Gump is really good, but there are several films that did release back in 1994 that I found to be much better than it. I had not seen Back to the Future yet, don't kill me for saying that. And I really enjoyed his last motion capture animated film, A Christmas Carol, which I know not a lot of people were too crazy about, but I found to be a fun ride. As for this, I just don't think this trailer really did enough. It's going to be another one of those movies where I see specifically for Denzel Washington because that man is one of the most phenomenal actors in the business today. But the rest of it just didn't really do enough for me. It didn't really spark any key interest. What did you think of this?
Well, first off, I have to say, definitely go check out Back to the Future, because that movie's just great. You definitely, you won't regret that. But the second thing I have to say is that, now, I first saw this trailer in front of Prometheus, and I don't know, I think the plot is actually really interesting. I mean, you have, of course, the character saves all these people, and, very extraordinary and, near-death experience, but of course, he faces all these legal charges that he was drinking and whatnot. That does sound interesting, and it could be a very good, dramatic story. But I think, I don't know, this trailer is weird to me. I feel like at times it feels almost like a made-for-TV kind of drama. It just feels kind of sappy.
Yeah, that's the kind of vibe that I was getting from it as well, in which really you have a very great concept that you can unravel with this film. However, for some reason, it all felt very toned down. Like, it didn't really feel like a Hollywood feature. It really felt like more it should belong on A&E or Lifetime.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that what really solidifies that is the end of this trailer when it shows it kind of how he landed it. And to be honest, I couldn't kind of help myself but chuckle because just what it showed was really kind of over the top. And I don't know, I laughed a little bit, but I think overall, I mean, you do have some pretty good actors in here. Well, of course, Denzel Washington. And the plot does seem rather intriguing. I don't know. I'm going to have to wait and see it. You know, Robert Zemeckis, he has made some good movies, but we'll have to wait and see because, you know, this does look, I think it looks interesting. Just the whole, you know, thing that it feels like a made-for-TV drama kind of sucks me out of it, but, you know.
Yeah, I'm hoping at least that it will be a surprise because you brought up a really good point with the fact of how he landed the plane in that way. But also there are shots that they show towards the end of the trailer also that they kind of spoil a little too much. Specifically, I'm not going to really get into detail of it, but there is one shot in this trailer that it only lasts for like 1 or 2 seconds, but it essentially spoils what happens to his character already. Like if you go back and watch it and just rapidly like click the mouse to just go second by second of the footage, you'll literally see that they spoiled the movie within the trailer kind of.
Oh yeah, I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen the trailer yet, go check it out and come back and tell us if you agree with us or not on that. But moving on to our last trailer, which is definitely one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I'd probably say I go as far as saying this is probably my second most anticipated animated movie of the year. And that is the trailer for Disney's new animated film, Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, I've been interested even before, you know, the trailer was released. I felt the whole concept of just the fact that it focused on video games alone. And, you know, I was hearing things like, oh, they're going to get, the license, to use actual copyrighted characters. So that intrigued me a lot. And then the trailer, of course, hit, and I have to say this definitely looks great as far as animated movies go. I mean, first off, I love the cast in this movie. I mean, you got John C. Reilly, you got Sarah Silverman, which is awesome. You have so who else is in this movie?
Jane
This
Lynch
one actor.
and Jack McBrayer are also in it.
Yep, that's true. That's true as well, and that alone really got me intrigued. But again, I like this whole plot that's going on. I mean, of course, you got the villain who doesn't want to be a villain anymore, and the one scene in the trailer when he's in that in the in the AA meeting. I'll talk to the villains, and the fact that they had actual video game characters, like Bowser and all these other villains it just kind of blew my mind, honestly, just to see all these actual copyrighted characters in a Disney movie. So I think that shows that they're really putting their all into this. And even the website, you can actually play the Wreck-It Ralph game, which is really funny. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to this movie as well. I think the voice casting is great, but I really, really dig the concept of it. But I also love of how his character doesn't want to be the villain, so he essentially game hops into all these different games that you see in the trailer, which he tries to fit in on his own. And I really like of how a lot of them poke at a lot of the most famous gaming franchises that exist today, especially how one of them is like a sci-fi version of Call of Duty, which essentially the game title was Heroes Duty. And then there was another one that poked at Mario Kart as well. Like, I'm really digging of how it feels like they're making this as an essential piece for the fans, really, of video gaming in general, and that they're not afraid to share their own point of views on certain gaming franchises that have really taken over this youth culture today, too.
Oh yeah, that's what's great about it, because like you said, how it kind of in so much kind of parodies these the most popular games nowadays, like the Call of Duty, the sci-fi looking Call of Duty game. It's in first person, and even Wreck-It Ralph, the character says, when did games get so violent? Which and I thought that was really funny. So.
Yeah, well, we're both really looking forward to Wreck-It Ralph. It doesn't release till, I think, November or so, though, so we still have a little while to go to wait, but the fact that we're already in middle of June right now, he's definitely going to come by fast, so check that trailer below. The links to all the trailers, of course, are below to check them out if you haven't already. And now we move on to the centerpiece of our show, which is Rate the Release. Now, we had several movies released in the past weekend, but we both saw the one that we wanted to see, and the one that we didn't really care about, Adam Sandler's That's My Boy, which bombed at the box office this weekend, might I add. And what we're going to review is the latest rock musical, Rock of Ages. Now, I was really looking forward to this movie because it had a great cast behind it, but I also loved of how it was really a nostalgia piece for the 80s era of hair metal rock and trying to the evolution going towards like the whole pop genre and so much more, of how there were a lot of one-hit wonders that were produced off that form of music as well. Now, if you guys don't know, this is based off of a Broadway musical, but they rewrote several different characters to the movie form, and they changed certain plot aspects as well. And the centerpiece of the film is these two young people living in Hollywood in 1987 who both want to make it big in the music industry. But there's also these two club owners who are played by Russell Brand and Alec Baldwin. There's, of course, the mega rocker performing his last show, Stacey Jacks, played by Tom Cruise, his manager, played by Paul Giamatti. Basically, there's a lot of people in this movie. And I had high hopes going into it because I really like a lot of the bands that had their music being featured in this film, mostly in kind of like a karaoke-esque version of it, because none of them have any of the true audio from it. It's all the actors' voices doing the singing, even though you can tell there's certain ones that can sing and others that they had their voices dubbed a little bit. And in the end, I have to say that I enjoyed the movie for what it was for the most part, and in which the musical set pieces were great. They were choreographed well, even though they had those random shots here and there that just didn't really do anything for the scene on its own. But my one problem that I had with this movie, though, which really brought my grade down, in which it wasn't the cheesy humor in any way. Like, I accept it. I mean, it's the 80s, so come on. But what my main problem that I really had with this movie is that the third act with this movie, like, they could have ended it perfectly after the second act. Like, it all built up well. It seemed like all cohesive and everything. But then they just pull all this stuff to add on like another 30 minutes or so, which not all of it really works really for me. So what'd you think of this film?
Well, I can't say I was extremely excited for this movie. I mean, I am a huge fan of rock and roll, mostly 70s and 90s, but, 80s music still has a place in my heart. And, I don't know, this did look like a really fun movie. There's a great cast. I mean, you have Paul Giamatti, Russell Brand, Tom Cruise. You had, really great cast going.
Cranston.
Look at the Bryan Cranston. Yeah, it looked like a pretty good time, and I definitely can't say I loved it, nor did I really think it was a good movie, but, I mean, it still had its moments, but I feel that it had more flaws. I guess I'll get the good stuff out of the way. All I have to say is that Tom Cruise was really, I thought he was great in this movie. I think
he sure
that
was.
A lot of people, agree that he just, really kind of relished this role. He was very into it. He was having a lot of fun with it. And I admit that when he was on screen, I always enjoyed what he was doing. He was definitely a lot of fun. And he's not bad at singing either, I think you can agree.
No, he isn't. Like, you can tell there are certain parts of where they had to edit his voice in the final sound editing process for the film. But from those parts that you can really tell that he was putting all his might into the singing aspect of his performance, and he did pretty good. Like, I'd really like to see like how he actually sounds singing, like without audio dubbing and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, he did a great job.
Oh, definitely. And the rest of the cast as well. I mean, Paul Giamatti, as always, does a great job. You have Alec Baldwin and Russell Brand. I thought for the most part they were all really good. And the musical numbers I felt were fun. And again, I'm a fan of this music. It's for the most part. I mean, I don't love all the bands, but I do like this music. But I feel that the main things in this movie, when it comes to story and as far as how well this movie was written, it kind of isn't that great. I mean, the main story, of course, focuses on these two young people who are in love with each other. But I didn't really feel a connection. I felt that it was paper thin, to say the least. I mean, they have really no chemistry going on, and I can't say I was all that interested in their relationship. And there was a lot of side stories as well going on, but a little too much. I felt that it kind of got overwhelming, and I wasn't interested in all of them. And I know this movie, of course, is centered around the 80s and whatnot, but I did feel that a lot of the jokes, and there were just some things in this movie that I felt were really kind of awkward and just kind of cheesy.
Yeah, like,
and I think the biggest thing for me, and I've had this problem with plenty of other movies, but just the runtime, it was definitely way too long. I think it clocked in a little over 2 hours.
It was 2 hours and 3 minutes.
Yep. I don't know. I think that this would have been a great kind of hour and a half. It kind of, again, I know this movie I'm about to mention has nothing to do with Rock of Ages, but when it comes to like the Transformers movies, those are like 2 hours and a half, and just for mindless action movies, that's way too long. And much like this movie, I feel that a lot of stuff could have been cut down. Had that been, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, and kind of excused some of the flaws and just enjoyed it for what it was. But the runtime really did kind of get to me, and, like you said, the third act was not that great. So I think, for the most part, this was a fun movie, but I think there were a little more flaws than good things, especially when it came to the length and, the multiple side stories and whatnot.
Yeah, I know, like, the multiple side stories was, like, I knew that was going to be one of the biggest factors in the film in which you're either going to just go along with it or it's going to get on your nerves a little bit. There were some stories that they did drag on throughout the movie, which they just kind of bugged me a little bit, or they just didn't really have a strong presence. Like, Bryan Cranston, for instance, his character, he plays the mayor of Hollywood, I think, in the film. It's either the mayor of L.A. or mayor of Hollywood. I don't really remember that well, but they set up his character well in the first scene that he was in. I was going, okay, it looks like he's going to be in this movie for a while. But then there's a stretch where he's just not there. He's non-existent for at least almost an hour or so. And then he just finally returns him, in which, like, he just doesn't really have a lot to do, really.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier, we're huge fans of Breaking Bad, and of course, Bryan Cranston is the main role in Breaking Bad, and I think he is an excellent actor on every level. And, there's plenty of movies where Bryan Cranston, I think you can agree with me, really doesn't do much. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if people have seen Contagion. He doesn't really do anything in that movie.
Yeah, no, that's the one problem with him, with his transition into the movie industry, apart from his acclaim in television with Breaking Bad and Malcolm in the Middle. Just every movie that he stars in, though, his role is too small. Like, Cranston will still play the hell out of just about any role that he gets or decides to star in, but his characterization and the screen time that he has, it just never amounts to the true talent that he has, though.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of movies I see, when I know he's going to be in it, I'm always excited, but in the end, I'm usually let down. I mean, he was in a good amount of movies last year, like, he was in Contagion, he was also in Drive, which I think he actually was really good in Drive, at least that movie, he had a good amount of screen time. But yeah, this movie is just you can add it to the list of movies where Bryan Cranston really doesn't do anything, and he's not given enough screen time. But yeah, that alone kind of got me mad, especially if you're a fan of his.
Yeah, no, we can save our anger for a while though, because he's got the co-leading role in Ben Affleck's Argo, which releases later this year though.
Oh yes, I'm very excited for that one.
So it looks like we can forgive him then for after that.
I think so.
Yeah, so overall, what would you give Rock of Ages?
Well, I thought about it. At first, I was going to go for a 3, but like I said, I did find more flaws. I definitely found more flaws than anything good. So I think I'm going to stick with a 2.5 out of 5. It was, it was still entertaining. There were still some things to like about it. And I feel that if you really like this music, and if you've seen, if you've actually seen the play before, I think you'll enjoy this. You might even enjoy it more than me. I've seen a lot of people who really like it, some people who really hate it. I don't think it was terrible, but it just was okay at best.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 because I am a huge fan of a lot of the music that they had in this movie, specifically Poison, Journey, Foreigner, Def Leppard, a bunch of the bands that are in it. I'm a huge fan of their songs that they made back during that time period. I felt like it did a really good job at capturing the 80s era with like the crazy clothing, the hair being all over the place, and so much more. And I really wanted to like this movie more than I did. Like, I just think it's somewhat decent because if they did a lot of extensive re-edits and reshoots and actually a lot of cutting more than anything else for that third act because it just goes on for too long, and it would have been just a much better film where I could have probably given it a 3.5 at that point. But I just want to know your thoughts on this. This is a small spoiler if you haven't seen the movie, but did you notice that in certain musical numbers that are throughout the film, there are certain characters that they include in some of the songs who really just aren't needed at all for what is trying to be told at the time? Like, there's one that involves Mary J. Blige just being from out of nowhere in one of them, and essentially she just does nothing to the scene at all.
I do know what you're talking about. It was kind of weird. I will go there.
Yeah, and there was also the church scene in which I don't remember what song it was for some reason, but they kept on focusing all these camera shots on the piano player for some reason. I don't know if they're trying to make like a Glee homage or anything to just the random piano player in the room, but that was just random too. But then again, when you go into a musical, there's always going to be those random shots that are just quick in the montage itself, in which they don't really last long. But if you look very closely at them, even just for their presence in the scene, they really do nothing for anything that's trying to be expressed, though.
That is very true.
Yeah, that's one reason why I'm not a huge fan of musicals either. Like, I've never really gotten into them. The only reason I had interest in this one was because it dealt with an era of music which I was very fond of, even though it's very overplayed on the radio all the time. And that's essentially because, as you said, you're a much bigger fan of 70s and 90s rock, in which those are the ones that are just good to kick back and always listen to with friends, while the 80s is reserved for the parties and over replay on the radio, pretty much. That's really all that the 80s era really did in its aftermath.
No, I definitely. That's why I was saying that, as much of a fan I am of the music portrayed in this movie, like Def Leppard, sorry, and Poison and all these other bands, they are definitely played a lot on the radio. I mean, I swear you'll hear, if you could listen to the radio every day, and you'd hear probably at least one song, no, more than one song from the 80s. I mean, I'm not, of course, there's some music channels that are specific to the 80s music, but yeah, a lot, especially I can't think of this
one
band.
of them.
What?
Journey's another example of the ones that are very overplayed.
Yeah, definitely. Just a lot of bands here are ones Journey. You hear them on the radio all the time. But again, the music is still fun, and again, if you like this music a lot, I could see you really enjoying this movie.
Yeah, like, I think especially people from the 80s time period will dig the movie the most because they were the most familiar with all of his aesthetics that came from not only just the music, but like the fashion culture and so much more, and like how everything was so cheesy back then, it was ridiculous. But just to throw it out to the side, I gave this movie 3.5, Tom gave it a 2.5, so as we said, if you're a fan of this kind of era and the music itself, give it a watch, and if you've never really been a fan, then this is definitely not going to change your opinion on that, though. But in the meantime, that's the end of this episode for the Film Freaks podcast. Next week, Jorge Zelandia, from formerly known as Active07, now has a new YouTube channel that he's been using for about a year or so. He will be coming on board as a guest next week, where we're going to be doing a lot of review, and we're going to review Brave, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, and Seeking a Friend for the End of the World, in addition to breaking down the latest trailers, news stories, and so much more. So in the meantime, I'm Tyler from CaliCriticReviews.
And I'm Tom.
And we'll see you guys next time on the Film Freaks podcast. Goodbye.